So before I step on, again, you can take it. We should be good.
All right. 2 seconds. Face paper, key. All right. If you want to just step on up here.
Step out of the pockets,
Yep.
things like that.
Keep your shoes on, take the stuff out of your pockets, and then just step up on here for me. And show me where your ASIS is. All right, and can you just lean forward real fast? Thank you. And then there we go. All right, and then just lean forward. And you want to make sure you keep your hand on your patient's back as you lower the table, because if they are not in club and don't know what to expect, you know, it's not going to be a comfortable surprise. So as you lower the patient on the table, the first thing that we're going to discuss today is cervical syndrome. Does anybody know what that is already? Great. All right, so cervical syndrome basically says that the subluxation is between C2 and C7, depending. So I'm going to ask my patient to just lay face down without moving, and I'm going to see that he has a right short leg. If you want to come over here and come right over it, we have a right short. All right? And so now I'm going to say, could you just look to the left for me? And every time you start, whether you look to the left or to the right first, that's up to you, but you want to stay consistent with what you do so your analysis never shifts. So as he looks to the left, his right leg stays short. Now I'm going to ask you to shift your head to the right instead. And if you look, his legs are balanced. All right? So what that means is he currently has a right cervical syndrome. We name the cervical syndrome for the side the patient is looking to. So when he looks to the right, can you continue to do that? It's called a right cervical syndrome, and we palpate on the left side. So the cervical syndrome is named opposite to the side that the problem is on. If you look at the board right now, like I said, you get presented with the head neutral, and you have a short leg on either side. It doesn't matter which side is short, it matters that there's a short leg, period. Whether the left leg is short or the right leg is short, erroneous fact. It's that you have a short leg. So when Mike looked to the left, this is backwards for what the patient was, but a patient's going to look to one side and the leg will balance, and the patient's going to look to the other side and they're either going to stay the same as they were, or it can get worse. So maybe after he looks to the side, his legs are twice as short. And you know that that's enhancing the subluxation or pulling further on the spinal cord through the dentate ligament. So if you look to the right again for me, now you palpate down the LPJ of the cervical spine. You're only going to feel this tender nodule between C2 and C7. I'm right in here, and what it is it's a subjective and objective finding. So you're going to see that you find a tender nodule, and what that is an inflamed joint capsule, or the capsular ligament specifically. And then for the patient, it's going to be tender and painful. It's not a tight muscle, it's not a huge knot, it's a tiny little, it's like a little bead or a little pea in their neck on their lamina-pedicle junction.
It doesn't move.
And it doesn't move, exactly. So it's solid, stays in place, and not very comfortable. And so once you find this, like his is right here,
Yep.
all right, if you want to look straight down. So you can figure out where the location is by palpating down the side of the LPJ. You're going to bring your finger back up to the spinous process, and you can count down specifically so you know exactly which segment it is. And for Mike right now, this is on the C5 vertebra on the left LPJ. So again, it's a right cervical syndrome, and you palpate the left LPJ. Now, the proper setup for this move, you stand on the side of the table that everything is on. So he's on it's a left LPJ, right cervical syndrome. So I'm standing the opposite side of the name of the cervical syndrome, or the same side that the problem is on. So I'm going to ask him to look straight down. Now, the next thing you have to do is weigh the headpiece for the patient. So I'm going to ask you to slide up a little bit so your face is... You want the chin to be 1 inch above the bottom of the headpiece when you set up on a patient. And now that he's set up, I know what everything is through his neurology. It's not a problem if I have him move to a proper position on the table, because it's no longer complicating my findings. Does that make sense? I already did everything properly up to this point, and I know that at C5 on the left LPJ, that's where the problem is. So I'm going to shift the headpiece to D, so the headpiece raises up, and see how that? So you raise the headpiece, and you loosen it until it drops. And then you turn it 2 half turns, maybe 3 back, so that the headpiece can support his weight, but it doesn't take any pressure to drop it. You see that?
Fingertip pressure.
Just an easy touch. So I'm going to leave the headpiece down because we're not adjusting right now. But the contact point is with the superior hand, and it's just in the LPJ with wherever your appropriate contact point is for yourself. Some people like their MCP, some people like their PIP. I'm not 6.5 feet tall. I really prefer to use my MCP to my PIP. I don't have the biggest hands. So I'm going to ask him to let me slide this in here and then look to the right as I set up. So I'm in the LPJ, and it's just a straight thrust through, and you don't thrust with the hand supporting the head. It's just supporting the head, and that's it. And as the table drops, it carries the adjustment through, and it's through Newton's law and inertia that the vertebra continues to go through the adjustment and get set back in place. Does anybody have any questions at this point?
What was the list then?
It would just be right cervical syndrome at L5. Thompson doesn't really do PRI, PLI the same way that a Gonstead listing does. You can't necessarily look at it that way, but if you have a different explanation.
It would be a PR, or left body rotation. So the spinous would be going this way. So
That's a
actually
body
when I'm
contact.
turning this way, you're pushing through the LPJ to reset the vertebral segment this way.
So it's not a spinous contact, it's a body contact. So you contact the side, if the spinous went to the right, you would contact here and be pushing through to push it straight. It's not that you're contacting the spinous and pushing it more the wrong way. That's the difference between a spinous and a body contact. If you have a PR and you push on the spinous from the right, then that would make it normal. Or if you have a PR and you push on the body from the left, that would make it normal. Does that make sense to you guys? Can you see that? I'm going to show that again just
So
on the
just
video.
run through what the leg checks
be-
would originally start with, and then
All right,
what
so
the cervical.
one more time. When he's down here, I'm going to have a short leg on one side. And then that's in the neutral position. So there's 3 possibilities from the neutral position if there's an unbalanced leg. And the one we're discussing now is only cervical syndrome. So now I'm going to have him look to the left first because I always start on the left. And his leg stays short on the right. And again, it doesn't matter which leg was short. Had it been like this instead of like this, that would not matter. As long as I come, check, and find it unbalanced, then it's unbalanced. Now could you look to the right for me? And then balanced. So that means he has right cervical syndrome again, because once he looks to the right, it relieves the pressure within the dentate ligaments holding the cord tight, and the cord relaxes, and it's no longer contracting all the musculature throughout his body to create a short leg.
Can you show the setup one more time?
Yep. So superior hand is your contact point. So if I'm on the left side, it's my left hand. If I was on the right side, it would have been my right hand. So I come in, I had him look to this right side, I found my contact in the LPJ, and then I had him look normal, and as I go to slide my hand into the LPJ to adjust, I have him look to the side of the cervical syndrome. Make sense? And then the thrust would just be P to A, and I would be holding with this hand, not thrusting. So don't get confused and go, this is not an appropriate motion. Imagine having someone go like this with your neck and your head. This is not what you want to have happen. You're just thrusting through and holding the head in place. Because if you push on someone's neck, their head's going to go too. So you just push through the LPJ, and that's how you deliver the adjustment. It's about speed and finesse. It's not about force. I'm not very heavy-handed, which is why I can just go and drop the table. You don't see me going, trying to hurt my patient, because the table does the work for us, and that's the point. It's about the doctor and the patient and both of their structural integrity. If you continuously thrust through your patients all the time without a drop piece, it's not going to take very long before your hands, your wrists, or further up that kinetic chain start having pains and problems. Versus, how is that going to possibly hurt me? And how is that going to hurt my patient? You have a specific contact point, your patient's comfortable, you are comfortable, and it increases the validity and the longevity of their adjustment and the longevity of the doctor.
Cool. Thank you, Derek. Can you actually lay down real quick? I'm going to just fill in a couple things about the patient setup before we break off, and then you guys can play with the tables for a little bit, switch off setups. And again, what he was saying is, don't get so caught up in the left and right now. All you're worried about for cervical syndrome is that you have a short leg. whether it's right or it's left. And then, depending on that, what you're looking for is, do the legs balance on head turn? And it doesn't matter which side. You have a short leg, it could be left or right, and then they turn their head either way, and all you're looking for is, do they balance? Looking either way. So that's all you need to worry about. So if you could just lay down. Oh, you didn't need to bring the table up. I'm just showing the setup again real quick, hitting a couple points. Keep going. All right, so one thing about, there's a couple ways. As Derek was saying, you can find your segment. So he said C5. If you come and palpate under the occiput, the first major spinous you're going to feel is C2. So you can also help your palpation skills. Can you tuck your chin a little bit? For help your counting. If you can't feel that first, you just 2, 3, 4, and boom, 5's right here. So I don't like to have them here, back here. And what you can do is now you have your segment. I can slide in and tell my patient to turn to the right, and it helps me turn your head all the way to the right. Good. And set up here. And I like to drop the elbow down. You're not going to be here into the table. You're dropping the elbow because your line of drive is P to A, I to S. And think about the facet joints. If you get a chance, look at the facet joints on the spine. You're actually gliding the segment through those facet joints with the curvature of the spine. You're adjusting into the lordosis of the cervical curve, right? That's another big point of why I like adjusting this way. Another way is, head straight. You know your segment, correct? You can come here, say, Derek, can you please turn your head to the right? Good. So I have my segment. Now that he's turned and he's relaxed, now I can also still slide in. And for this hand is not a thrust as hard as you're doing here. This is just to help drop the table. Because what you should do is drop this elbow, and this is the line of drive in this direction, and then this hand just helps drop that table, right? If I had to break it down in a ratio, it would be an 80-20 type of thing. A lot of the new people that I have adjust me, I feel, boom, 50-50. And most of the time, the biggest mistakes is 50-50 and at this angle, right? So what you need to do is drop that elbow, get it P to A, I to S. And for this one, what you want to do is don't cup the ear. That's not comfortable for the patient. You want to go over this zygomatic arch. So what you're going to do is, it's not a grab and push down. That's not what it's doing. It's a traction up and away this way. And what you're doing is using this contact hand as your fulcrum, right? You're tractioning and creating more tension, and boom, deliver the adjustment. What most people do is they're just thinking pushing down, and what you're really doing is making it uncomfortable for the patient. You're not really adding more tension at your fulcrum, at your true contact point. So get the contact point, traction to create a little bit more tension, and boom, thrust, and I'll drop the table. Does that make sense? So, all right, so that's the cervical syndrome. Again, if you're we name it by the way the face is looking. So if they're looking to the right and the feet evened out, that's a right cervical syndrome. If they're looking to the left and the legs evened out, that's a left cervical syndrome. So 3, 2, 1, break.
One more statement. The facets in the cervical syndrome are an average of 45 degrees. That doesn't mean that every single person is the same and you can rely on that fact, but you should be aware that it's not thoracics and it's not lumbars, and you should be able to feel within like 43 to 47 degrees, give or take, but you should palpate and feel your own patient's spine motion. Don't make assumptions, and make sure you're just within that range.
All right, cool. And by all means, just set up, play with the tables. Anyone with a name tag is a certified member or is part of Thompson board, so feel free to ask any one of us the questions.